Champ, Chapter 11. Caught in the Crossfire. That night we sat in the kitchen eating dinner. Mom, Dad, and me. Champ was curled up under the table so I could scratch his side with my sneaker. I attacked my meatloaf and mashed potatoes as fast as I could, hoping to get out of there before anything was said about the afternoon. It didn't work. Soccer, track, now baseball. You can't keep quitting just because you're not the best player on the team, Dad said. I didn't quit, I mumbled. I just haven't signed up yet. Riley's been busy, Mom told Dad. He's done wonders with that dog. Haven't had one problem out of Champ lately. Then she turned to me. There's still time to sign up if you really want to, isn't there? There's no such thing as too late, Dad answered for me. The team depends on every player doing their part. They depend on you, Riley. I could almost hear a pep band playing Dad's high school fight song to go along with his words. I pushed my fork into the side of my mashed potato. Gravy spilled through the crushed wall and pooled in the center of my plate. I'm too busy for baseball, I mumbled. Dad pushed back his plate. That was never a good sign. It meant he believed what he had to say was more important than eating. You can't let building a playground for your dog interfere with everything, Dad said. We told Riley he had to take care of his dog, and that's exactly what he's doing, Mom said. Dad glared at Mom. Mom stared back. If their eyes had been lasers, I would have been caught in the crossfire. I want you to stop wasting your time, Riley, Dad continued. I'll get you signed up for baseball, but you have to give the team everything you've got. Is that understood? It wasn't a question. I needed the answer. He expected me to understand it, or else. Is that what you want to do, Riley? Mom asked. Of course it is, Dad answered for me. That's what all the practicing was about earlier in the season, wasn't it? You wanted to play baseball, and I want to help you be the best you can be. It'll be fun, Riley. You and me practicing together. Mom ignored Dad. Do you still want to play baseball? She asked me. All my life, I had wanted to do something to make Dad proud of me. I didn't want him to be mad. That meant there was only one answer. I guess, I said to my mashed potatoes. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder. I'll go to the park's office during lunch tomorrow and sign you up. The next day, Mr. Douglas was where he had been every afternoon for the past 3 weeks, in the back of his garage. I didn't waste any time telling him the news. I can't work with you anymore. I have to go to baseball practice, I said. I'll help you take down all the equipment on Saturday. Mr. Douglas rearranged a hammer on the pegboard that hung on the garage wall. Well now, he said, baseball is fine sport. You'll make a great player. But just because you're playing baseball doesn't mean you have to give up on the agility competition. Even professionals do more than play baseball. It's a fact that Babe Ruth spent a lot of time on the golf course and Mickey Mantle wrote books. But I have to go to practices, I told Mr. Douglas. Then there'll be the games. I can't be in 2 places at once. That's true, but I'll be right here when you get done, Mr. Douglas said. We can work with Champ then. Now Scoot, your team is waiting for you. Champ was used to spending the afternoon running through obstacles. He didn't want to go inside and wait while I swung the baseballs. When I opened the door to the porch to let him back in the house, he dodged as if he were playing keep away. Inside, I urged, using my meanest voice. Champ woofed and hunkered down, liking this new game. When I reached out to grab his collar, he hopped back, just out of reach. I gave up on my mean voice and went for a whining one. Come on, I pleaded. I'm going to be late. Why not take him with you? Mr. Douglas called across the fence. It didn't surprise me that he had been watching, but it did surprise me that I didn't care. I guess spending 3 weeks working side by side with Mr. Douglas had gotten me used to the idea that he always seemed to know what I was doing. I faced Mr. Douglas. How can Champ keep up with my bike? I asked. Go slow, Mr. Douglas said. He'll keep up. You'd make that pup happy. I looked back at my dog. Mr. Douglas was right, and I knew it. Champ had proved he could do more than I ever imagined. Besides, if I made Champ go in the house, he'd probably get mad and herd all my underwear right out the front door for the neighbors to see. Are you sure you're up for this? I asked my dog. Champ wagged his tail. I guess that meant yes. I left Mom a quick note on the kitchen counter telling her where Champ and I would be. Before I pedaled down the driveway, I turned to Mr. Douglas. Mr. Douglas stood there by himself. Watching, of course. It struck me for the first time how alone he was. I waved to him before I turned back down the sidewalk and headed up the block. Mr. Douglas was right. Champ followed me the entire way. When he fell behind, I'd steer my bike to the curb and wait for him to catch up. Since Champ only had one front leg, he looked a little lopsided jogging up the sidewalk. He moved a lot easier and was much stronger than when I had brought him home from Dr. Fayette's, that's for sure. Running those obstacles was obviously doing more for Champ than keeping him from hurting pillows and shoes. It was keeping him fit. As we got closer to the ball field, I slowed even more. I wasn't in a hurry to see the team. My stomach bunched up and I could hear my heart thud in my head. I knew the feeling well. Dread. I'd felt it almost every other time I'd shown up for a game, but today it was even worse, and I realized why when Champ swiped at my hand with his tongue. For the first time, all the kids on the team were going to see Champ. They would see his 3 legs and they'd all remember how he got that way, how I had missed the ball and caused an accident, and ended up ruining a show dog's career. If they thought long enough about it, they'd all realize that the last person they wanted on their team was me, Riley Walters. "Hey, there's Riley!" Kaylee yelled as soon as she saw me ride up. "He brought Champ." The rest of the kids turned. A dog on a field with a bunch of kids is like a magnet. As a group, they stepped toward me, and Champ. Then they all started talking at once. "He's so friendly! Not stuck up like Mrs. Lerner. He hardly limps." The dread slipped away. I guess kids can surprise you sometimes. Even bothersome kids like Erica. Today was one of those days. "You should see how Riley trained him to go through tunnels," Frank said. "He's built an Olympics course for his dog in his neighbor's backyard, complete with jumps and balance beams and lots of other stuff. It's for the contest at the picnic this summer." I had help, I said, but the other kids didn't hear. They were too busy asking questions. "What kind of tunnel? How'd you build the jumps? Did you get to use a saw? My dad won't let me." "How can Champ do those things?" Champ went from kid to kid, letting each one scratch his ear or pat his back. Nobody seemed to notice he only had 3 legs. They just accepted him for what he was, a friendly dog with a sloppy lick. I couldn't help but feel proud of the way he was making friends so fast. I had never been the center of attention before. It felt kind of good. I show Champ what he needs to do, then we practice. He's quick to catch up, not quick at doing it. They were still asking questions when Coach Johnson blew her whistle to start practice. I knew Coach because she was Luke's mom. She didn't seem to mind that I was late joining the team. I didn't do any better than usual that day. Still swung through the lots of empty air, but it didn't seem so bad. When the ball bounced past me, Champ would hop to it. Nobody seemed to mind that the balls were getting a little soggy. By the end of practice, Champ had made friends with just about everyone, even Coach Johnson. "Champ makes a good mascot," she said, patting his head. "Bring him any time." Mr. Douglas, true to his word, waited for me in his garage every day after practice. Champ ran the obstacles better and better, though he still wasn't fast enough to win any competition. He couldn't get the hang of the 3 things no matter how many times we tried: the balance beam, the teeter-totter, and those blasted weave poles. They were as hard for him as hitting a home run was for me. The balance beam, the teeter-totter threw off his balance every time, but he was willing to try them, and I was always there to keep him from falling. But Champ wouldn't even attempt the poles. I would go in and out of the poles, showing him how to do it. Then, when I gave him his command, Champ skipped them all and ran for the tunnel instead. "They're too close together," Frank said one afternoon when Kaylee and a couple of other kids followed me home after practice to watch. "It's not normal for dogs to zigzag like that," Luke added, throwing a chew toy into the yard. Champ took up after it, not paying the least bit of attention to the weave poles. It's darn near impossible for a 3-legged dog to make those tight corners, especially when he just wants to play. Mr. Douglas stood at one end of the line of poles. I stood at the other. Frank leaned against Mr. Douglas's garage, using the end of his bat for balance. Kaylee and Luke sat under the balance beam. "The course takes discipline," Mr. Douglas said, almost to himself, "and effort." "If they weren't so close together, I bet he could do it," Frank said. "Wouldn't meet the competition regulations," Mr. Douglas said. Still, after all this time, Mr. Douglas hadn't given up on the idea of entering Champ in the contest at the fair. "Frank might be onto something," I said. "The opening game for the league is at the Founders' Day picnic, so we can't be in the competition anyway. It wouldn't hurt to space the poles farther apart, just so Champ could get through them." Mr. Douglas smiled. "Riley, I think you have a good point. The way to tackle a big problem is to start with simple steps. Let's give it a try." Everyone pitched in to help pull out every other stake. The remaining poles left plenty of room for Champ to maneuver. I grabbed Champ's chew toy and hid it behind my back with my left hand. With my right, I pointed to one end of the poles and gave him his command: "Weave," I said in my sternest voice. Champ looked at me, then darted between the first 2 poles. "Good boy," Kaylee shouted. "Go, go, go," Frank yelled. But they cheered too soon. After the second pole, Champ skirted around all the rest and looped over to Frank. I watched Champ sniff the end of Frank's bat, circling it like it was a big stick, and he was waiting for Frank to throw it. "He'll never get it," I said, throwing the chew toy to the ground. "Never. He'd rather circle Frank's bat than those poles sticking in the ground." "That's because he likes people," Kaylee said. "Maybe," Frank said slowly, "we can help." "How can you help?" I blurted. "Not me," Frank said. "We, the team. I have an idea." And then he was gone, racing down the driveway on his bike.